Hello. Um, Thank you for allowing me to come and present at your Dynamo user group tonight. I believe it's your evening, it's my morning. Sorry I can't be there in person, well, via Skype. I'm actually on a plane flying from Wellington, New Zealand to Auckland, New Zealand. So hopefully next time I can be there virtually via Skype and we can have a bit more interaction around Dynamo and how we get used to coding things within Revit in a visual context. So this presentation is actually a presentation that I did for Autodesk University in 2016. The presentation there was recorded, so feel free to search it out and review the presentation that I gave at Autodesk University as well. So the presentation was designed to provide novice users or people with no experience in coding the ability to come to Dynamo, experience it and get something out of it. We'll talk about the interface, what's involved, and really take you on a journey to preparing your very first Dynamo graph or script to automate something in Revit. I've broken this presentation into two parts. I'm aware that time limits are in place, so I'm going to try and keep this presentation 20 minutes and cover the first section, which is really getting into Dynamo and understanding where you can get useful resources and what the interface might be for absolute beginners. And then hopefully I can come back and give the second part and we can have a bit more interaction, ask questions around creating some basic nodes and graphs. So I've kind of really covered that one, so we'll skip over that. So Dynamo, this isn't Dynamo, but you know, some people do think it's magic. He is Dynamo, but we're talking about a different one today. So what is Dynamo? It's a software application and it's a plugin for Revit. The software application itself, Dynamo Studio, can be used standalone. Outside of Revit, you can use it with Format and several other packages from the Autodesk ecosystem. But the one that we'll be talking about today is really about the plugin for Revit. It started as a open source project. It's a visual programming editor. What do we mean by that? You don't have to code in a text document fashion. You don't have to learn a new language to code. Basically, you place what we call nodes, and you join the nodes together with wires. What is a node? A node is think of it as a piece of code or a function or a program that runs that might include some Python. And it'll take some inputs and it'll give you results via outputs. And we use the wires to pass data or information from one node to the next. So we'll take the inputs that we require and put that into a node, and then the outputs or the results from that node to the inputs of another node, and just passes information backwards and forwards, and it'll execute the program that we're trying to achieve. So what can I use Dynamo for? There's a lot of talk about Dynamo being used for computational design in the construction space, but that's a small part, albeit a very exciting part of where we can use Dynamo. And I think the attraction is because it's quite visual and you can create these really stunning models and complex geometry quite quickly. It gets a lot of visibility, and a lot of people have associated Dynamo with just this one small piece. But in order to create this geometry, we're actually interacting with parameters and we're passing data and we're manipulating that data. And we can use the same thing or the same functions and tools, and we can apply that to creating views and placing views on sheets, creating the sheets themselves. We can use it for model management tasks, auditing models and starting to create reports around the health or the well-being of models. So if your job is to review models on a weekly basis for your firm, you can start to automate some of these functions and free yourself up to do other more interesting things within your organization. It's not limited there. You can use it for all sorts of things. I've seen people using Dynamo to create external spreadsheets for tracking of resources, like human resources, who's working on what project, how long they worked on it. All the way through to using it for facilities and asset management within a firm by connecting spreadsheets to Revit models to highlight on floor plans, staff movements and stuff. So it really it's down to your imagination and what needs or desires that you need to fulfill, and you can use Dynamo to assist in that. So how do you get started? There's a ton of resources on the internet. My favorite ones are Dynamo Primer, which is the go-to start place for all things Dynamo. But getting away from some of those areas, you can start to get some really interesting blogs and very passionate individuals behind the blogs inputting their lessons learnt into their blogs. One of these would be Dynamo Nodes, who comes from What Revit Wants. Luke Johnson, who runs What Revit Wants, has also created dynamonodes.com and is focusing his experiences on Dynamo into this blog. The Archilab website, which is Conrad, and he's a very good contributor to packages within the Dynamo environment. He has the Archilab package, one of my favorite ones, and also Bumblebee for interacting with Excel. He runs a blog on his packages, but also how to do certain functions and automate them with Dynamo as well. DynamoPackages.com is where you can go and find a lot of packages that will extend Dynamo beyond the out-of-the-box environment. DynamoBIM.org, where you can go and download Dynamo, and then of course Google. Ask Google a question and it'll serve you up answers. So I guess one of the first things you're going to want to do getting into Dynamo is how do we get more out of it? And getting more out of it is really by enabling these packages. So what is a package? The package is a collection of nodes, programs, functions that the open source community have contributed to the Dynamo environment. And one of my favorites is Clockwork. Don't leave home without this one. There are several that fall into this category, but this is just one of those givens that you should download as soon as you install Dynamo. Go and search out the custom package, Clockwork, put that in there, and it has so many functions that you can use. Things for iterating parameters, things for doing mathematical things, restructuring lists. The list goes on and on. There is so much in this package. It's really a must-have from day one. Another must-have is Lunchbox. Again, a brilliant set of nodes and usable content in here straight out of the box. Just get that one. Other ones are Rhythm. That's another brilliant one. Data Shapes. Data Shapes is a package that you can use for exploring, or not exploring, but taking your inputs and giving a graphical interface to those. So as the Dynamo node or code executes, it prompts the user to adjust the slider bar, and they can adjust that and to enter input values. It works brilliantly with Dynamo Player. So that, definitely do get onto these packages and get them installed. And some of the most fun with some of these packages, just the names themselves. Another package that I would kind of recommend that you get from the get-go is Bumblebee. A lot of work that I do and people that I talk to around the world do involves inputting data to and from Excel spreadsheets, and Bumblebee was a package dedicated to handling the input and output of information from Excel to Dynamo both ways, and it is a really wonderful package and a must-have. It may be worthwhile talking about packages at a future time in a more dedicated session. There is literally hundreds and possibly thousands of packages out there, and you know, they're evolving all the time. I've only touched on a few of the highlighted ones. If you do go into the package manager or into the package library within the Dynamo BIM website, you can see which ones are the most downloaded and which ones are the most useful. These packages are worthwhile having. However, a word from the wise, always check for your updates. We are dealing with an open source community, so things can be changed and replaced without warning. So keep your backups. Always be prepared to roll back your Dynamo installers. You might create a function, you pass it out to your firm, everyone is relying on it every day now, and then Dynamo gets an update. IT roll out the update, and then your package, your thing that you were dealing with is no longer there, and it's just broken and nothing is working, and suddenly the entire firm is hating on you for creating this broken function, and it's nothing to do with what you've created. It's a function of the community and how the community react to things. I will say that the community is very active, and they are very resilient in this, and given as time's moved on, the updates have become less and less buggy and less prone to falling over when updates come out. But it's worthwhile having Dynamo installers so you can roll back and keep your firm moving forward if you've become quite reliant on what you've created. Some hot links. Conrad, he has a blog, archilab.net. On his blog, you'll find information about his packages that he creates, and also other workflows using Dynamo to speed things up and automate things. Marcello, great AU presenter. He'll have several classes at AU and on the website that you can search through for things to do with Dynamo. If you're into structures, he's works in a structural engineering firm, so a lot of his Dynamo work is related to dealing with specific workflows that relate to engineering and structures specifically. Adam Sheether, he's another great guy making a lot of packages out there. He made DynaWorks, which is a series of Dynamo packages that allow you to interact with Navisworks and do things like detect where the clashes are and create symbology inside Revit for where those clashes are, and so on and so forth. Philip Chan, Luke Johnson, Dynamo Primer, and The Proving Ground are, again, wonderful blogs to assign to. They're each of these content creators have very good and active Twitter feeds. It's probably worthwhile searching them out on Twitter, following their feeds on Twitter. A lot of people are updating their blogs and posting when the updates are done via Twitter, so you can keep a track on those blogs and for updates in real time going forward. So let's have a quick look at the Dynamo interface. So I think you can break the interface into kind of 4 key sections. You have your menu at the top, toolbar. There's nothing exciting or special about these things. That every software application seems to have a menu and a toolbar. The excitement comes in number 3, the library. The library is where all the packages reside. The packages are broken into categories and subcategories, and we'll have a bit more of a detailed look at the library in a couple of slides. Then there's the workspace, number 4. The workspace is where you place or lay out the nodes, connect the nodes with the wires, and the workspace also allows you to preview geometry. So if you're using Dynamo to create geometry, you can see the geometry that's being created in 3 dimensions in the workspace as well. And then there's the execute bar or button at the bottom, which has 2 modes, automatic or manual. I recommend that if you're new to Dynamo, make sure that you set it to manual. The last thing you want to do is have Dynamo reiterating and executing each time you make a change to your graph. You don't want to undo your model by accidentally deleting everything just because you wired something incorrectly. You want to have a point in time where when you're learning to use Dynamo to be able to execute it and know that you're going to run this function. So set it to manual mode, and then you can click the run button or the run bar, and that'll run that code at that time. There is a place for the automatic function, and that'll become more evident if we come back and have a look at the randomizing the facade function, because then you can adjust the slider, and as the inputs are changing as you adjust the slider, the facade reiterates in virtually real time, and that's wonderful from a design feedback point of view. You can reiterate your design in real time to settle on different options or solar shading or all sorts of things. Maybe it's a pattern layout or colors. A Dynamo node is kind of represents itself as a box. On the left hand side you have your data inputs, and on the right hand side you have your results or your outputs. At the bottom there's a couple of little icons. There's the lacing icon, but the one I use a lot is the data preview icon, where you can actually preview the results of the node, and this really helps you to understand how your graphs are coming together. You can see the parameters that have coming through and being collected by this function or node. If it's a selection node, you would see the selected objects that are being captured by this node. Or if you're doing something with parameters, you might see the results of those parameters or a function being reported there. It saves you having to put watch dialog boxes everywhere, and you can just preview quickly parts of the graph that you're making, and it helps with troubleshooting or bug fixing any graphs. You can step back through separate nodes and see where information might not be joining up and completing and going through, or where an error might be present. Fix that node and then pass the information on again. The wires, this is how we connect the information, and again we kind of work from a left to right flow. We're taking the outputs from a node and we're passing them to another node inputs. As we wire these together, going from out to in, we can I prefer to work in a left to right flow, but some people, they work up and down, or they can quite quickly end up back on themselves. And I'll talk a bit more about keeping your Dynamo graphs clean in a later slide. But just think of these wires as the data connectors. They're very much like wires for carrying electricity, but they just carry data in this tool. The Dynamo library, it's the best part of the Dynamo library is it's dynamic. As you start to type in a function or something that you might want to interact into the search bar, the library will minimize to show you nodes that relate to that. That's probably the most useful function of the library, is that search bar. I use it all the time. I'll start typing something like filter or view or template, and it'll start to show me nodes that relate to creating or controlling or filtering views, creating templates, editing text, working with parameters. You just start typing, say, parameter, and it'll start to show you all the nodes that relate to that, and they'll list out, and then within the nodes themselves, they're broken down into categories and subcategories, and you'll see in the categories that might relate to geometry, and then there'll be circles or cones or lines. It might be to do with parameters, and there might be all the edit parameter nodes, and then the search parameter nodes, and then the replace parameter nodes will all be there. So it's very quick to understand which node that you might need to use. And then if you just click on a node, it'll give you a little flyout, a little explanation about the node, and it'll tell you what the inputs require, whether it's a point or whether it's a value, and it'll tell you what the result will be as well, the output, whether it be some geometry, let's say a circle, or whether it be some text or a parameter output, and there'll be a short description and often a little graphic for the icon as well. The building blocks of Dynamo are all of these nodes. Getting to understand that you have these nodes broken into different categories will be a big help in your understanding or uptake of Dynamo. We have nodes that are broken into what we call kind of data blocks, things to manipulate data or create data. There are other nodes for creating geometry, things like cones, cubes, cylinders, spheres, they're there as well. There are other nodes for creating and managing lists. I feel this is probably the most useful set of nodes or blocks in Dynamo, because one of the fundamental things to understand is when you work with Dynamo, it's a lot to do with managing a list. And if once you get that understanding that it's a list of data and you're editing that list of data, and you need to keep the format of the data consistent, it makes everything else flow so much easier. And then there are all the Revit specific blocks that could be related to, say, view templates or hiding an element or unhiding an element, things that are very specific to the core functions of Revit that kind of exist in the Dynamo library. Keeping your program aligned, or I guess keeping it clean is another good way of describing it. I think it's really important. It's a must-do thing. Some of the earlier graphs that I made, I wasn't so diligent with keeping them clean, and I would come back to them several months later and go, how did I put this together? I'd made it, but I couldn't understand how I'd put it together. So what I do now is I tend to keep my programs clean. I work from left to right, and I kind of group things into common areas. It might be some inputs. I'll group them in a layout, so they're all kind of clumped together, or I might even physically group them in a group and give them a title, and then I'll have that linking to the outputs, and all of the outputs or functions that relate to those inputs I'll group vertically, and then I'll have the next step off to the right of that, and just work my way across. If you right click over any kind of selected set of nodes, you'll get a menu, and you can group from there. You can rename a group, you can ungroup a group. It's very intuitive, and you can also use the align functions to grab a bunch of nodes and align them left or right using the X and Y alignment tools. And that just helps you to quickly reorganize a Dynamo graph. In terms of grouping the nodes, once you group them, they definable color background. So another trick or thing that I do is I tend to follow some simple color guidelines. I might have all the inputs one color, all the functions another color, all the outputs a third color, and that way you can quickly understand that these are the things coming in, this is the calculation area, and these are the outputs or the results. And you can use these as breadcrumbs for kind of understanding what you created. Often a lot of Dynamo stuff that I create is done on the fly very quickly for a specific function, and then several weeks later someone will go, oh, I saw you do something the other day and it was looked like it was real quick, can I use it for my project? And you might just need to do a simple tweak, or you might be able to pass over the graph. And having a good layout and good grouping methodologies allows third parties to pick up the stuff that you've created, understand what inputs are required and what the results will be. And it really does help to further educate and train other people within your own firm what's going on with your Dynamo graphs. All right, so that's kind of the end of part one. Part two, I was hoping to cover some hands-on examples. I think I'll come back. Jonathan had said that he was keen to have me come back and maybe do a part two. Hopefully the first part of this presentation has been useful. I'll pass the whole presentation over to Jonathan. Feel free to work through the examples in your own time. You can download the handout from AU if you want further explanation on the steps. And I hope to see you online at a future date. Thank you for having me, and enjoy the rest of your evening.